and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the current situation both at home and internationally as well. In our first segment, we're going to be taking a look at another dossier that Pakistan has released with reference to the atrocities that have been going on in India for quite some time now against minorities, including Muslims, Christians and Sikhs. And this is important, especially in terms of what is going on not only in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but the rest of the country as well, especially under the BJP regime and the Hindutva ideology that has been seeped into the society. And this is something that, of course, is quite unfortunate in terms of the kind of violence that we see now on the streets that is sponsored by the state and that is encouraged by its political leaders as well. And this is something that has been highlighted in this dossier that has been released by the Islamabad Policy and Research Institute. And this again talks about the very vast scale of atrocities that is being conducted. And not only that, also talks about the kind of propaganda campaigns in the media that have also been run in order to curb any dissenting voices and to make sure that none of what is happening on ground is actually highlighted and that the rest of the world gets to learn about it. But Pakistan, of course, as always, is going to highlight these issues, and so this dossier is also along the same lines of Pakistan's responsibility in making sure that it is able to voice what is not being heard at the moment and make the world realize and understand what the so-called largest democracy is actually doing and how it's actually acting and is so far away from the kind of a secular flag that it raises. So we're going to be talking about this dossier and figure out what really it says and what impact it can possibly create for politics in India, especially in light of the upcoming elections, and then also both internationally in terms of how India is being viewed and how different countries have relations with it. Our next segment is going to be taking a look at what is going on in Pakistan on the economic front, especially with regards to the end of mission of the IMF that was here in the first half of November. It was the first review under the standby arrangement with the IMF that Pakistan earlier came into effect with the IMF. And this is, of course, something that is one of the biggest achievements that Pakistan has been able to put forward in a very difficult time of need. And so this first review is also extremely important in order to understand the progress that Pakistan has made since the beginning of this arrangement. Of course, the statements that have come from the IMF staff are subject to approval by the IMF board, and following which we know that we will have access to around $700 million US. And this is, of course, something that Pakistan is relying on, not just in terms of numbers, but also the impact that it will have on other bilateral engagements and policies at home as well, in terms of the situation that the people here are suffering and how exactly they're going to go ahead and move about in the coming days, especially in light of the upcoming general elections and the kind of strategies that are needed at the front, especially with regards to the reforms, with regards to the economic sector and, of course, government policy. So we're going to be taking a look at how this missions review went about and what sort of statements are coming in and what sort of policy direction will now be taken and how hopeful we are of also getting approved by the IMF board. For this and more, of course, in the studios, as always, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal. For our first segment with regards to the dossier on Indian atrocities, we've also been joined online by our guests who are going to be joining us very soon, and I'll introduce them as soon as they're part of the debate. But Faisal, let me start with you in terms of what is going on. Of course, Pakistan has released previously many dossiers as well and has shared them with the international community, highlighting the kind of atrocities that are being conducted and the kind of propaganda that is being run by India. And so this is perhaps not new for us in terms of what is going on, but again, it's important for us to be able to highlight and reiterate to the world as to what is going on. What do you think is the most impactful aspect about this dossier?
Sana, first of all, creating a dossier for, of course, the Western world, and it should be, in a recorded form. now, I mean, I think we have realized that this is important always to do it. We know that in past we had sent few dossiers, and them dossiers, they had their own importance. So this particular one, it has its own importance. The most important aspect is that these are the events, the incidents which are taking place, the genocide which is taking place in India. It is being recorded, and it is being obviously presented where it should be presented at any cost. So to me, the first importance. The second importance is that India, today's India, I mean, it portrays itself as a shining India, and sort of portrays as if it's a huge market for the Western world. At the same time, it should be highlighted that these are the anomalies which are actually taking place constantly without any hindrances within India against the minorities, not only against the Muslims, but of course the Christians and the Sikhs as well. This is highly important. But when we talk about Muslims, we know that in recent times, especially since Modi took the office first time, this has been going on. It was being considered as a state involved in it, a state policy that has been carried out against the Muslims. If we talk about RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, that was the sort of binding force behind the religious factor behind BJP's government. BJP is empowered by them, and they are the ones who are behind the hatred against the Muslims at large within India. And of course we know that Kashmir particularly has always been seeing brute force used against them. But at the same time, Muslims at large within India, elsewhere in India, they have been subjected to this hatred, and the hate is a never-ending hate, and that is actually increasing day by day. So it is important to highlight that. It is important that all of the powerful corridors of the world, they must know whatever the realities, the ground realities of India today are. And the special part in which the genocide factor is highlighted. I mean, there is a slow process of genocide which is taking place against Muslims within India, and that is of obviously constant hate promotion against India, and media is involved in it, government itself is involved in it, and time and again it had been portrayed by BJP that its vote bank stays intact just because of one reason, and that is as long as they are promoting hate against Islam, against Muslims at large, and against the Islamic history that obviously had a span of almost 1,000 years in India. As long as it gets diminished, as long as it gets defaced, and the wrong atrocities are associated with that phase of India, that is the motive, and that is the intention of BJP, and this is how they would keep on ruling India. The hate factor against Muslims, it had pertinent with the BJP's government, and that needs to be highlighted time and again.
Right, absolutely. Let us also welcome in the debate Brigadier Retired Mr. Raashid Wali. Janjua is also Director Research, IPRI. Thank you very much, Janjua Sahab, for joining us and being a part of the debate. And of course, this dossier has been prepared by IPRI, and this is important, especially in terms of what has been highlighted. And perhaps you'll be able to give us a better perspective as to the kind of research that went into this and the kind of input that was taken in, and how exactly is it that these figures were calculated. And what do you think is the essence of this dossier in terms of what it talks about and what it signifies, and where do you think can this be actually put to use to help the people who are suffering?
Thank you, Sana. This dossier has been prepared by Islamabad Policy Research Institute as an annual exercise during Magala Dialogue, that we launch a book, and this time the theme chosen was the persecution of minorities in India, which include mostly Muslims and Christian communities. So this is a very important document, and it includes data and the pictures. It's a pictorial coverage and supported by solid research, which essentially shows the extent of persecution against Christians and Muslims. And it focuses on desecration of the places of worship and flagrant violation of Places of Worship Act 1991. 121 churches, those have been destroyed, and there are 1,600 mosques which have been earmarked for either uh, demolition or completely being taken over by the Hindu extremists. So this document essentially lists all the details and all 1,600 mosques which have been identified by Hindu RSS and its affiliated Sangh Parivar have been very meticulously listed. The data has been collected and their pictures have been identified. These include 10 main mosques, and the mosques like Yan Vapi Mosque in UP and Madhya Pradesh, and even the shrine of Khaja Moinuddin Chishti, that is not being spared. And then there is a methodology which has been identified. It is a stage-wise methodology. The first stage is the selection of the target by the Hindu extremists. They pick up a mosque or a church, and in the second stage, they start casting doubts about that and spreading lies, so that the next stage, which is the active advocacy against this place of worship, and the litigation stage. And they press into service the use of Archaeological Survey of India. And because of the majoritarian tyranny, those institutions do not offer a very objective scientific uh, inquiry, and they gave into Sangh Parivar, and mostly in 99% of the cases they validate what the Hindus want. And the case in point is the Babri Mosque in 2019. The Indian Supreme Court has validated and that this entire land should be given to the Hindus. And now Modi had in 2020 has even laid a foundation stone for that. So it's all based upon a systematic procedure in which they first identify, they cast doubts, they go for the prosecution and litigation, and then mad hysteria is whipped up, hatred is created, and then violence also takes place. In Manipur, the Christian churches have been, wantonly desecrated, and 121 belonging to different denominations, three of them the Roman Catholic and rest, some Presbyterian and some belonging to other denominations, have been ruthlessly destroyed. So this is happening in a country which professes in its constitution to be a secular country, but the reality is absolutely opposite. India is in the grip of communal madness, and the majoritarianism of RSS ideology. Hindutva ideology is based upon the concept of Ghar Vapsi, that every symbol of identity, whether it belongs to Christians, whether it belongs to Muslims, whether it belongs to Sikhs, should be completely erased. And they are so insecure that of late they have renamed Aligarh as Harigarh. So this is absolutely ridiculous in this age and in this era, where human rights and rights for worship are clearly enshrined, even in Indian Constitution. As I just mentioned, the Places of Worship Act 1991 clearly lays down rules and laws by which no place of worship could be encroached upon. But that law is being flagrantly violated the judiciary, academia, civil service, civil society, and rest of the population, they are completely under the hateful grip of this mad ideology, and the result is the killings, desecration of the places of worship, and now a systematic campaign to reclaim the last vestiges of the architectural and the religious heritage, whether it belongs to Muslims, whether or Christians. It doesn't matter to those RSS goons.
Right. Right. Janjua, there's also, of course, the fact that when we take a look at what the situation is on ground and what blatant violations are happening, then how is it that India continues to go ahead with it? But I'll come back to you for more discussion on that in terms of what then is the way forward. But Farrukh, before that, I also want to take your opinion, especially in terms of the fact that this dossier, as Janjua was highlighting, also talks about violations against other minorities. Of course, there's Muslims, but there's also Christians and Sikhs, and then also their people and their places of worship that are being targeted. And so perhaps whenever Pakistan sort of talks about issue with regards to India, it perhaps may be taken in terms of the limited perception of Pakistan standing up for the people of Kashmir or for Muslims, but this is much more than that. It's about the kind of human violations that actually exist across all religions there. Do you think that this is something that this dossier or Pakistan is able to communicate to the world, that this is not just our problem, it is everyone's problem?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. And let me begin by congratulating IPRI and Brigadier Saab for this very important dossier. Let me also circle back to the question that you asked at the start, right? And that was regarding, whether it is going to have any impact or not at all, because we have made more dossiers in the past. So here's the answer. The answer to the question, why bother? All of these dossiers are like a charge sheet. They're like an FIR. If somebody is either absconder or they are protected by some kind of privilege, doesn't mean that you stop actually registering FIRs against them. Someday they are going to be vulnerable, and when they do, all these things will come back to haunt them, because there is a very important documentation of their crimes. Now let us talk about India and the way India has been moving so far forward. I mean, it is clear that when you talk about Sangh Parivar, their second founder, I mean M.S. Golwalkar, when he wrote his book Nationhood Redefined, right? In that he has very clearly said that what Nazi did in Germany is an example to emulate, and that is not all. He said that the minorities should either convert to the religion of majority, or they shouldn't have any rights, always ready to be expelled from the country at the will of majority. This is his words in his book. So we knew what BJP is, we knew what this organization is, right? Now, because Modi has become far bigger than even Sangh Parivar, and this unfortunately, and I keep on saying that one of the misfortunes for humanity is that India calls itself a democracy. And because it calls itself a democracy and it has procedural democracy, everything is employed to win an election. So right now, the abuses continue against Christians, against Muslims, against Sikhs. That is not all. Cricket is now a recent victim of abuse. We are seeing the way that is being violated in India during the World Cup. Similarly, umpteen other things. Everything is meant to ensure one thing, that Narendra Modi wins the next election. So India's biggest problem, Sana, is that it is highly stratified society. It has castes, and those castes are such that actual majority is the lower caste. And if they are given a chance, they will of course be ruling the country. So this elite capture of the upper castes is justified by one thing, and it is called Hindu consolidation. Always other community of the society, present them as a threat. Brigadier Saab was talking about this othering, right? Where they talk about ghar wapsi. But then there's love jihad. India kept on promoting and encouraging people to marry across communal lines, right? Throughout, because that was proof of secularism. Now those marriages are called love jihad, that they are Romeos, Muslim Romeos, which are prepared to actually seduce your daughters like an incubus. So with that kind of fear in people's mind, they keep on using this fear of the other to consolidate their base, so that the lower caste are so charged that they forget that they are actual victim, despite being the majority of the country. And this Hindu consolidation, Sana, is going to continue. It is going to mount in next few months until India's elections are due. Once elections are over, then perhaps, and this is, remember, they have the kind of power that India's name, which is known all over the world, which is registered with the UN, just because an opposition alliance called itself India, they ended up calling themselves Bharat, right? If they can do so much changes, bring so many changes to their country's name and everything, they are doing everything is grist at BJP's and Modi's mill for their elections. Until that time, this abuse will continue to accentuate, increase. I hope that after elections it comes down, but I don't see any evidence of that either.
All right. Faisal, we, of course, whenever we talk about the Hindutva ideology and what is going on within the country, we talk about the BJP regime and how the situation has worsened under their rule. And then, of course, with regards to the way that the politics of the party and what you were talking about earlier, their affiliations with RSS is something that is impacting this entire situation. But I want to understand whether we can actually narrow down the problem to BJP. Did these violations not exist prior to the BJP being in power? Is there something that we can actually separate in terms of this particular party's involvement, and how perhaps if that's out of the equation, there can be some sort of a different situation or a solution or a hope for a change? Is that something that you think is the actual situation, or is it broader than that?
Very good question.
Sana, it's an excellent question. And when we talk about whether it used to take place before BJP took the premier office or not, yes, it used to take place before, but it had no backing from the state itself. I mean, now state institutions are involved in it. State institutions so much so that even the judicial system, when it comes to, giving different verdicts on religious matters, I mean, even they feel, their judges feel that if free and fair trial is given to the Muslims or minorities, then they might be, facing a grunt from the RSS side, or because they know that all of these, outfits, the religious outfits, the Hindutva ideology outfits, they are empowered. They have the power. And of the government backs them, the state backs them. That is why, I mean, it is more dangerous now. It is part of their system now. Before, it wasn't part of their system. It was just like a majority was, doing something against the minorities, but state was always intervening. But now state does not intervene at all. Now state actually promotes it. We have seen in recent years that whatever happened in UP, I mean, UP is a place which has a population almost that is equal to Pakistan's population. In UP alone, there are several incidents in which they have been given a free hand to do whatever you want. See, in India, it is a sort of precedent, a very bad precedent which is being followed by the Indian politicians from different states. I mean, UP state, Yogi Adityanath is following a precedent which was set by Modi himself. Modi's precedent, what was it? It was when he was CM of Gujarat, state, whatever the havoc was done against the Muslims out there, he actually backed it, and everyone knew that Modi supports it. And with that support and with that kind of narrative, he became Prime Minister of the country. Now Yogi Adityanath sees this, the similar case, that if he continues to support all of these rogue elements, all of these hate-filled elements within India, especially within UP, then he will be one day able to become Prime Minister of India. So this precedent is being followed, which is very dangerous not only for India itself and its minorities, but of course the peace of the world, the peace of the region as well, because this imbalance within the humanity would create havoc for the whole world and the region at the same time. So to me, I think right now, I mean, earlier while we were talking about how to go along with this dossier, I mean, we have seen in past that there were certain dossiers which were presented by Pakistan, and at the same time there are few thinkers from Africa and from the Western world themselves who have been highlighting the slow process of genocide which is taking place in India, and they have been working really hard on it. But I think somewhere down the line, the state of India must be taken to taken to Geneva or Hague. I must say Hague, because International Criminal Court, they should be the one who should be hearing all of these cases, because this is against the humanity. This is against the Hindus themselves as well. Earlier, very smartly, Farrukh was highlighting about the upper caste and lower caste. Lower caste, they are in the majority in India. I'm talking about the Dalits. Dalits, they classify themselves as Hindus in their Aadhaar card. But when it comes to in this society, what kind of treatment they face, it is worse than the minorities they face. Why? Because they are untouchable. They are not even allowed to go to their mandirs, their temples. They are not allowed to go in there. They are not even allowed to touch an upper class Hindu, because it is believed that if they touch anyone, then of course they need to go for abolition or whatever. So this is the ideology as a whole. It is based on such racism that it should be shunned by the all-powerful corridors of the world.
Right, and this brings me to another question, Janjua Sahab, with reference to when we take a look at what we want. Of course, what we're hoping for, or what we say when we highlight these atrocities, is that we want them to end. That is, of course, what is the standpoint. But at the same time, when we talk about what has now happened, if we talk about how perhaps the situation has worsened under the BJP, and how this ideology is now part of the society on a much larger extent than it was before, what now then? Even if we remove the BJP, or even if there are elections and there's a change of government, supposing there is this situation where somebody else, some other party is in power, it is going to be still part of that society which now has developed this ideology so strongly within their roots. How will we be able to expect change now from any sort of political segment or quarter, or new emerging political leaders from the current society, if it is so deeply rooted within the society in itself? Will this not always guide political considerations and motives? How will then you be able to escape, for example, the caste system that Faisal was also highlighting, in terms of how this is part of the belief system of so many people? Will this not be always a variable that is considered by political leaders?
I think the answer was given by Dr. Ambedkar, who belonged to a Dalit community and rose to the highest position in India. He said that if Hindu Raj becomes a reality, it would be the biggest menace to democracy in India, and that is coming to pass now. At a personal level, I am more skeptical about the ability of any other party also to douse the flames of this hatred now, because the poison has seeped so deep into the Hindu psyche. Perhaps it is that virulent nationalism which has come alive, which still looks back to 1,000 years of bondage, and it takes a kind of a visceral pleasure in avenging the imagined wrongdoings by the former rulers, maybe whether they were Christians, whether they were Muslims, they don't care. And we must remember that it was the Congress government in 1990 that first allowed uh, Ram Mandir's foundation stone laying. It permitted, and
It was
after
unlocked,
that,
yeah.
the BJP, under L.K. Advani, it resorted to a Rath
That's it.
Yatra, and then in 2014, after Modi's ascension to power, this madness got more traction, and it was complete journey of complete obliteration of the identity. And in 2019, Supreme Court has validated, and now 2020, foundation stone has been laid, and in next year, probably in May, they hope to inaugurate the constructed mandir on that Babri mosque, which once stood at Ayodhya. Now, you see, it's a complete negation of historical facts, complete negation of pluralism, and complete negation of human rights. India is signatory to Genocide Convention, so it's a violation of Article 1 of that convention once they do not vent the loss of identity of a culture and a religious community. Whatever is happening again in Muslims against Muslims in IIOJK, as per Gregory Stanton of Genocide Watch, they are into the eighth stage, which is the extermination stage, and after that comes the stage of denial. Same is the case in rest of the India. And I think these violations of human rights should be presented to the world in a packaged form. IPRI has done a humble, bit, and I think it is such like evidences which should be, presented before International Criminal Court, and the responsibility fixed on those individuals which are responsible for perpetrating these wrongs and which violate the provisions of even not only international law but Indian Constitution itself, which guarantees the right to worship to all communities. And
Right.
to me, I think should be a groundswell of opposition by the minorities within India. Whatever is happening in Manipur, it might happen in all of the India, and that would be a stage which would be a very dangerous stage for the internal harmony of India.
Right, absolutely. Janjua Sahib, you keep referring to the number of violations and violations of international law, conventions, resolutions of the United Nations, or even India's own constitution. And one would assume that whenever there's violation, there is something of a consequence that actually happens. Otherwise, there is redundancy in whatever action is done in violation of something else. And so it seems that whenever we talk about any consequence or the fact that India gets away with whatever it does, it seems that perhaps even violations are required to be brought up by somebody, or need somebody to actually object to them and ask for something to happen because something has been violated. And I want to then understand if this is something that is done perhaps if we talk about UN Security Council resolutions by states that have their own political interests, if we talk about India's constitution, perhaps by the people that already have the belief that is part of the Hindutva ideology, or the institutions within India that are also working under the same influence, then how really will we be able to follow up any violation in terms of actually pointing out that this is something that needs a counter action?
I think the voices will come out of India also. There's a large minority, Christians, Sikhs, Muslims. Now even Dalits are not being spared. So they have also become a quasi-religious denomination as far as the high caste Hindu Brahmins are concerned. So when these voices gain traction and the international community takes notice, there are forums like United Nations. There is a international covenant of elimination of racial discrimination, to which India is a signatory, and according to its several articles, India is in breach of those articles. So those breach of religious and religious freedoms and rights would be called out. And if international community starts ostracizing India, I think the pressure would come on India to see the light of reason and allow the kind of freedoms of worship and freedom of building the houses of worship and desisting from their desecration. Otherwise, it's a steady march to the communal madness, which is continuing, and we have seen that the likes of Vishwa Hindu, Prashad, and Bajrang Dal, they are becoming more strident, more aggressive, and they have their global presence also. And now in countries like United States, in Europe, in UK also, their diaspora organizations, which are an affiliate of Vishwa Hindu Prashad, they are getting more active. So this thing is very, very detrimental to the image of India as a country which professes to be the largest democracy and a secular country. But the reality is exactly the opposite. And I think this reality will ultimately catch up with India, and the centrifugal tendencies would start getting more traction if these things continue.
Right. Thank you very much, Janjua Sahab, for joining us and being a part of the debate. And of course, talking to us in detail about what IPRI has released in terms of the violations that exist. But Farrukh, I want to talk a little bit more also about the change that may be possible, and understand that what Janjua Sahab was referring to is the increase of a collective voice coming also from within India and externally as well, that sort of builds up. But I want to understand, over the many years and decades that we have seen, the atrocities, of course, have worsened, and there may be many that have joined this collective voice. At the same time, they're paying a huge cost. There's a lot of action taken against them. I want to understand whether or not you think that this slow build-up of people joining in and standing up eventually does lead to something, and is not, in fact, counterproductive in a way, in terms of this being something that is normalized or people used to, or is not strong enough to shake up anyone or any organization. Will this actually lead to something, or is it more of a lukewarm effect that we see, and we don't really have that big blow that is perhaps needed for a change?
You're asking brilliant questions, Sana, today. Earlier you asked one question. Can I respond to that as well?
Sure.
In addition to this one. When you asked Faisal that whether these communal violence, episodes of violence have been taking place before BJP as well or not, his answer was that, especially now they have the patronage from the state, right? But here's the interesting thing. Minus one episode that we know, apart from 1947, another episode was 1980, in the middle of 1980s, against 6, when Indira Gandhi was assassinated. At that time it was Congress. But usually the elements that have been supporting such violence are essentially the same people who have been actually part of Sangh Parivar. This is important to understand, because India's founder was assassinated within no time.
Nathuram Godse.
Nathuram Godse was also Hindu Mahasabha, which was a parent organization of Sangh Parivar, right? So with that kind of a situation, everybody who has been doing this has been doing it on the basis of the same elements of hate. But what is happening now, Sanam, regarding the elite capture or BJP capture of the state, the one thing is swarm every institution, from Supreme Court to Election Commission to accountability bodies to army to everything. Promote only those people who actually are supportive of your agenda. The second one is, of course, why was this violence happening when Congress was in government? Of course, it used to actually placate, Hindutva as well. That's why they have this soft Hindutva allegation against them. But actually what was happening, Sana, at that time was India's state itself, internally, is very weak. Their governance falls apart. If you move out of India's Delhi, within 30 kilometers, you see that the things are dilapidated and everything is not taken care of. So this is a post-colonial state. But they have to keep on projecting it. The third one, of course, is gradual decimation of those who could have actually, supported a change. So right now, to come to your answer, your question, recent question, is there a silver bullet? I think that this collective activism is not going to work.
Okay.
It is a game of chess. So what is the silver bullet? Who has the cards? I can tell you who might actually be the man who has actually unleashed the Kraken.
Okay.
His name is Nitish Kumar, who is the Chief Minister of Bihar. How? India's biggest fear, and especially BJP's biggest fear, has been this, casteism and somehow audit of caste, if that takes place. How many are there belonging to one caste or the other? There was an activity back in 90s, it was called Mandal Commission. And that Mandal Commission was working on it, and that was against which Hindutva actually took over, and it actually rose to prominence because they were opposing it. Now, Nitish Kumar has done something that BJP has been blocking in entire India. He has conducted a caste survey of Bihar. So at this moment, that caste survey that shows that upper caste are merely minorities, that is going to be, until there is a survey in the entirety of India, it is going to be a survey or a sample of entire India, right? So the opposition leaders can especially use this to show that you keep on getting exploited in the name of the religion, Mandir versus Mandal, but the fact is that you are being abused by the minorities who are elite capture, right? So with that, in that way, I think that in this election, if sensibilities are there, if people are inoculated, if majority of Dalits realize that they are being exploited,
right,
within no time, government can change in elections. But as of now, Sana, a Morning Consult actually conducted popularity survey of all the leaders of the world, and do you know who was number one? Narendra Modi with 77%. So why is it that Indian elite doesn't want to, keep any qualms, and they want to exploit everything because they cannot take chances.
right.
Right now, I think Modi has actually started compromising on these things, but the actual vanguard of extremism is at the lower level that Faisal was talking about as well. Modi actually, if he prevails, he can moderate these elements. But will he, won't he, we don't know.
Right, absolutely. We're going to now also talk a little bit about the economic situation in Pakistan. And Faisal, of course, the end of mission statements have come in with the first review of the standby arrangement. And of course, this is subject to the board's approval. But so far, with regards to what has been said and what the mission has spoken about in terms of the government's efforts so far, how hopeful are you of approval by the board?
Well, I am hopeful because this agreement and this approval from obviously IMF, it is pivotal when it comes to Pakistan's economic revival and Pakistan's economy's sustainability, because of course we know that during the previous government it was obviously very important aspect of Pakistan's economy that Pakistan was after this IMF deal, and we know that the talks with the IMF during that time they were facing hindrances, and now of course during this interim government we have been seeing that the positive indications were already appearing, and this particular meeting, it was so successful meeting, and now of course we know that the agreement, staff level agreement, it has been signed, and it showed that all of the satisfaction was right there on the table, and this is going to be very important for obviously Pakistan's macroeconomic sustainability as well, because IMF itself in its statements, it has said that they believe that this is going to play a positive role in Pakistan's economic growth and at the same time they see the positive indications from within Pakistan's economic route which is being taken by the current government. So it is fingers crossed, it's all positive for now, and for the future we can say that Pakistan has actually gained that trust from the IMF side, which would eventually lead us towards the other friendly countries as well. We have been talking quite extensively about our friendly countries as well, because they have been watching on all of these talks as well. So I am pretty much sure that in coming days what we'll see is that all of the friendly countries towards Pakistan who had this this point of view, that they have been just waiting for the outcome of talks between Pakistan and IMF.
Right.
If they are positive, they will be going ahead to coming towards playing their contribution towards Pakistan's economy. So we are seeing that it would be more positive in coming future.
All right, and Farrukh, in ways that the government, of course, has tried to overcome the current crises and the kind of measures that were taken and that perhaps have to be taken in the future as well, in terms of the plan and in terms of the way forward. Do you think that we can still proceed in a similar manner as to the first quarter, and would there be any significant changes in terms of what is required by the government?
Right, Sana, I think that the first great news is that doctor, after you had the surgery back 3 months ago, 4 months ago, after that the doctor has come to your home, checked your vitals, and doctor is telling you that your vitals are picking up, improving, right? This is a sign of that, because whenever staff level agreement takes place, that essentially means board usually doesn't stop it, right? Because these people are very competent, they know what they're talking about. But let me also congratulate certain people here in the order of appearance of mention. Finance Minister Shamshad Akhtar and the Finance Ministry, Governor State Bank and State Bank itself, SIFC, right? Current Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif. Notice that I'm not, praising the former Finance Minister Ishtiaq Dar, but I'm praising the Prime Minister then. And why is it so? Because they have actually all have put in a lot of effort in ensuring things. Why SIFC, Sana? During this whole process, IMF sought, assurances, reportedly assurances from our brotherly countries, like the Arab countries that actually support. And I'm happy to report that they were totally satisfied by these countries with all the assurances. So this is great work as well. Now, what kind of changes are going to be there? Because essentially the framework was laid down at the start of the program as BA. Because of that, not massive changes. But there are going to be expansion of tax, I think, as far as I know, in the two sectors, the retail sector perhaps, and real estate, right? And a few other things, but I think that all of them are doable. The most difficult part is perhaps over, but we keep on going after this elusive ideal of macroeconomic stabilization and doing away with twin deficits that have been haunting the country for quite some time.
All right, that's great that this is something that is encouraging, and we're happy to be able to see that, and hopefully we'll get the approval as well from the IMF Executive Board. Thank you, Farrukh. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us as always in the debate. That's all that we have from the show. We'll now see you tomorrow.